Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new animated film, Rally Road Racers. I saw this movie in the theater with my kids, so let's talk about it. So kind of last month, the Super Mario Bros. Movie kind of demonstrated that contrary to the recent trends and popular narratives, that family audiences haven't necessarily fully abandoned the movie theaters. So now Rally Road Racers kind of comes speeding in out of nowhere to test that theory. So this is a movie, I'll be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about this movie going in. There really just seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of promotion for this thing ahead of time. Haven't seen trailers or things on TV. It comes from at the start of the movie, all the different production studios, didn't recognize any of them. So this isn't kind of one of the big players from like Illumination or Disney. This is sort of more a bit more obscure, although it does feature a couple kind of recognizable actresses and actors who lend their voice to this, including J.K. Simmons, Chloe Bennett, and John Cleese. And I'll say kind of overall, and then we'll get into this thing, is that I think this movie does offer some kind of passable fun and wholesome messages for younger viewers, although there are some maybe more potentially thorny elements that I do think might leave some parents like myself kind of looking for an off-ramp and maybe just thinking it's not worth the effort. So we will get into that. But kind of another trend that this movie seems to be going kind of against the grain with is it seems like in recent years there's sort of been a whole lot of discussion of kind of movies that were intended for the theaters kind of being dropped straight to streaming thanks to the pandemic and a bunch of other reasons that even movies from bigger places like Pixar start on streaming. Rally Road Racers kind of seems like the opposite of that. This very much feels like a movie that was intended to be straight for streaming, and that somehow kind of veered off course and found itself into the movie theaters. And that's not necessarily to say that this is a bad movie. It's just not as polished as sort of similar films or what you'd expect from even something like the Super Mario movie or movies like that. Because kind of both in relation to like the plot and the visuals, this movie is a little inconsistent. It kind of wavers between moments that are very clever and inspired, and then other moments that just feel unfinished. Like with the visuals, there's sort of they blend, which a lot of movies have been doing lately, kind of 3D and 2D animation, which can be quite interesting. Particularly, there's a kind of an extended scene where the whole aesthetic kind of adopts this like black and white kind of sketchbook type look, and it is cool. It's unique. I don't think I've seen that in an animated film before. But kind of overall, the animation just feels a little like unfinished, a little bland, a little like it's not fully rendered. And kind of the same is true of the story itself. There are fun moments in this. There are some exciting things, but the world building and this never feels as fully developed or as immersive as something like like a Zootopia, where you kind of understand what this world is and how it all works and the creatures. In a lot of ways, this film kind of almost feels like it's like an earlier draft to maybe a potentially more complete and cohesive film. Although one of the things I am always conscious of when I go to review these animated films is that I am not the target audience. And this is a film clearly made for children, not grumpy old adults and parents like me. And like I said, I did go see this with my kids. So I thought, hey, this is a movie for kids. I would bring in some kind of guest expert movie critic to share their thoughts on this film. So what do you guys think of the movie?
I liked it, and it was really fun. And crazy. Yeah.
Was it funny?
Yes. I think one of the funny parts is when Vanglorious shoots one of his minions into the and I think when the funny part is when all things break and they're yes, and goes up all the ramps. That's one of my favorite parts.
What lessons? Did it teach you any lessons?
What I would say is never give up. like never give up, keep going, like perseverance.
Do you guys want to watch the movie again?
Yes. I'd be 100 times again.
So as you can tell, my kids enjoyed this movie more than I did. Although in the movie itself, they were kind of fidgeting and maybe not as engaged with it as they have been in other films. Although they did enjoy the humor, enjoy some of the excitement. And like I mentioned earlier, I think there are some good themes and wholesome stuff that comes out in this film, and there is sort of enough for kids to sort of be entertained and kind of diverted by. Although there are some more kind of thorny, potentially problematic elements that I think as parents we need to at least keep in mind. So why don't we jump into that? It's kind of on the surface, things going on, content to consider. Language, there's no profanities in this. The closest this movie comes is a character, I think, says, "What the heck?" And then there's also sort of a handful of what I call rude words, idiot or imbecile or kind of insults and stuff, but nothing overly concerning with that. Violence. No violence. There's sort of a couple like brawls, like fist fights between the characters, but there's no blood, and like the stakes are never very serious. Sexuality. This is where at least some of those concerning elements, or at least things to be aware of, maybe going in, come into play. And there's really two, with one being a bit more serious than the other one. The first is just that this film does have a very heavy emphasis on kind of the main kind of boy character's like really infatuation with sort of this female kind of character that he's falling in love with, and that she's sort of falling in love with him, to the point where they're sort of, they talk about like being into each other, and she's like daydreaming of him, and he's sort of all he can do is talk about her, and he's like dreaming of like what their wedding's gonna look like, and so very much sort of obsessed with this sort of infatuation with this girl. Again, obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not there's nothing necessarily nefarious about a boy and a girl falling in love and having feelings for each other. Although I do just mention that as parents, that if you're a parent that maybe just isn't comfortable or just doesn't want to necessarily like introduce pre-puberty children to that sort of hormonal kind of romantic dynamic between boys and girls, then this film does center in on a lot of that. So that's one thing to be aware of. And the second one, as far as sexuality, and this is again I think the bigger concern in this, is that there's a sort of a plot element of a character who is a seahorse, who is a male, who is pregnant, and this is sort of featured all throughout. And apparently, thanks to a good old-fashioned Google search, that's true to nature. Seahorses are, I think, about the one of maybe two species in the animal kingdom where the male actually is the one that gets pregnant and carries the children, the offspring. So in that sense, it's not even factually inaccurate, although it is quite jarring. You don't see that coming. Most people aren't going to know the National Geographic kind of story behind that. And really, given this the wider cultural backdrop and conversations going on about sort of sexuality and some of that, the whole kind of subplot really does seem conspicuous, and I think probably motivated just to choose, if you need a pregnant character, to choose the only species where the male gets pregnant just is kind of weird. And even the character itself, although beyond just being pregnant, really is sort of this like a cliche or caricature of pregnancy, where very emotional mood swings and kind of real cookie cutter in that way. And this is something that my two sons, 8-year-old sons, immediately sort of looked at me and noticed that it stood out as being different and being weird. And in the end, is a quick explanation after the movie kind of cleared that up, and we moved on. So I don't necessarily know if it's going to be anything overly problematic, but it definitely is there, and it definitely seems like it's probably tapping into sort of some narrative. So if you're a parent, be aware of that as well. Maybe the other kind of content to consider is this spirituality. We're going to get into this a little bit more in the next section of this review, but Eastern spirituality and kind of religion plays a central role in this story, maybe kind of akin to something like Turning Red or Kung Fu Panda, where characters sort of, there's like an ancestral, I guess, a shrine to like the ancestor, to the grandma, and with like candles lit, and the characters sort of talk/pray to the character, and they're doing Tai Chi and very much talk about these spiritual concepts. So that sort of goes kind of laced all throughout this movie. So as far as things, kind of themes and kind of worldview stuff going on beneath the surface of this film, probably the main one is this sort of sense of finding your purpose, or as in the language of the film, finding your Tao, kind of tapping into that kind of Eastern religion. Because very much this film, the way it sort of presents that sort of searching for identity and purpose does seem to kind of blend a more kind of Western individualism with sort of more a traditional Eastern kind of spirituality. Because the main character, kind of his journey throughout this film is that he's wrestling with sort of a sense of his own identity and purpose, in contrast to sort of what his grandmother who's raising him and just sort of the wider community expects of him. His species, he's an animal. He's a slow loris, which I'm not familiar with, but they seem to be basically a mix of a bear and a sloth. Very peaceful, sort of slow-moving creatures, which makes him, the character, stand out because he has a need for speed. He wants to race, and he doesn't quite fit into the expectations of his society. And at one point, he kind of even expresses it. His frustration, says, "I'm just trying to be me." So very much, not necessarily even in like a harmful, self-centered way, but just sort of searching for identity, finding how you fit in, in a community, but not necessarily where you lose a sense of yourself. And that theme is not one that's uncommon in a lot of these sort of films, especially the kind of coming of age type stories. I think what maybe sets it apart in this film is sort of the way that he accomplishes that, which is done in a very kind of quasi-spiritual, religious path. His grandmother kind of throughout the film is instructing him in Tai Chi, which is sort of a martial arts, dance, meditation practice that's supposed to kind of guide him to finding his Tao. And again, I'll be honest, I'll express my ignorance. I don't know the inner workings of sort of some of this religious stuff. The way it's presented in the film, at least, is that this Tao kind of essentially represents sort of inner peace, belonging, that you sort of understand, you sort of know yourself. And it also kind of manifests as almost a superpower, where by finding his Tao, he like literally slows down time, and he's in like this sort of Zen-like mode where he can, accomplish things and think really fast. So that's sort of going kind of all throughout. There's sort of that mix of that. And I don't think this film necessarily is one that's like, it's not preaching this religious, the spirituality. It's a lot more just sort of reflecting the beliefs and some of the kind of traditional religious stuff of the culture which it's set, which is set in China. But it's definitely very much all throughout this film, sort of the language of sort of finding your Tao and your inner peace and purpose. So in the end, this feels like a movie that probably should have stayed on streaming. I don't think it's a bad movie. It just, I don't think it's quite at the quality that you expect from a lot of these theatrical films. And although there is some wholesome stuff in it, I think some of the maybe the spirituality and like the pregnant seahorse and some of those themes and stuff that are in there, I don't necessarily think that they're big game changers or things that a parent can't just talk with their kid about and kind of come to an understanding. But I think with a film that isn't necessarily itself super compelling or captivating, I think some parents will probably just feel that it's not worth the effort to have that conversation, to have sort of that imagery, and maybe just might sit this one out and wait till it does eventually come onto streaming. Although, again, like you saw, my kids did enjoy it more than I did, so maybe your kids will enjoy it as well. But hey, if you see this movie, if you take your kids, Would love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed it, if you've kind of felt like me, that kind of left you wanting a bit, or what maybe you thought of some of the themes or some of the decisions that they made, and if you saw some problems in there, or if you think maybe that they were intended more innocently, would love to have that conversation with you in the comment section. And if you haven't done so, I encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a Collider. Got a lot of movie reviews and other content coming, especially as we move into the summer. A lot of big movies coming. I would love to have you just join with what we're doing here. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide through World for Christ.